Shalom. You're listening to Rabbi Simon Altaf from Vienna in Austria. Today we're going to discuss a couple of things. Number one, ancient Israelites. Who were they? Or more importantly, who were Abraham's ancestors? And we'll also discuss who is a Jew by Torah standards, not by perception, but by what the scripture writes about the real people of Israel, and then the forefathers, the ancestors of those people, such as Abraham, and going further back to Noah. So a lot of people ask me this question. They say, you say you are a Kohen, but you don't look like me. And this question usually comes from black Americans who are a little bit confused about their history, especially about Israelite history. And I think it's important for me to at least give you some guidance as to why I don't look like you, or why I don't have locked hair as most of you have. Because I think the more important question should be, when we look at this, we're going to get the answers that you're seeking. So let's go back to Abraham and Abraham's ancestors. Most people believe that Abraham lived in Iraq, and that's where he was brought up, that's where his family was. So traditionally, most Christian scholars stroke Jewish scholars probably say that he came out of Iraq, and perception. That perception is entirely wrong, because Abraham did not come out of Iraq, neither did his family. Since most of you probably never left your state, probably never left your country, so you wouldn't know any better, what real history is about. So first of all, if you had ever gone to Turkey, you'll find out that the cave where Abraham hid from one of the earliest rulers, as you know, Nimrod, when he was hiding in a cave in Turkey. How can he hide in a cave in Turkey if Abraham is from Iraq? Which means he was a baby at that time. Which means that the perception that you have been given about Abraham's family is entirely incorrect. Abraham's family were domiciled in Turkey. So if they were domiciled in Turkey, surely he couldn't be from Iraq, could he? So you have to now correct yourselves as to what is going on. So did he originate from Turkey? Did his ancestors originate from Turkey? Well, again, unless you really know ancient history, you're gonna be guessing, second guessing. It's almost like saying that I live in Vienna, I'm from Austria, but I don't look nothing like the people over here. Their skin color, their skin tone, their dress code, nothing like mine. So could I say that I'm from Vienna, Austria? No, of course I couldn't. If I was living here for 5 years, 10 years, I couldn't say that I'm from Vienna, Austria. Same way, Abraham's family couldn't say they are from Turkey or from Iraq. Both conclusions that most people are making would be incorrect. So where did Abraham's family come from? Well, if we look back at India's ancient history, his family actually originated out of India. That means the important question is not, should I look like you, the Negroes in America? The important question is, should you look like me? Because Abraham looked like me. If Abraham looked like me, then I look like Abraham. Therefore, I have a more right to Abraham than any of you in America. Why? Because you probably don't even know the plantations, beyond the plantations where you came from. Most of you know where your grandfather worked, or great-great-great-grandfather worked as a slave. Well, I can tell you that my great-great-great-great-grandfather came out of Iran, Persia, and we served the great kings of Persia at that time, where we were domiciled when we were expelled from Israel, because everybody knows it. It's written in the Bible, it's written in history, so all over the place, that where Israel was domiciled, the 10 tribes, they went to north, then to the east, and the 2 tribes of Israel, Judah and Benjamin, with of course Levites, they also went to Babylonia, then to Persia. And Persian Empire in the ancient times, to revise your history, wasn't Africa, by the way. Persian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, in ancient times, they uncovered parts of ancient India. So ancient India, what is ancient India today? Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. Three nations came out of ancient India in 1947 in the partition that occurred through the British rule and the Raj in India. So, taking you back into history, who were Abraham's ancestors? They were people who called themselves Yadavas. The Yadavas were Indian people, and Josephus Flavius, who is an important historian from our people in Israel, and he writes that he believed, and he quotes historians, that the ancient people of Israel belonged to Indian philosophers. Well, if we belong to Indian philosophers, then that takes me back to the Yadava people who actually left India at one point in time. That would mean Abraham's fathers. They left India, and then the question is asked, why did they leave India? And the answer is given because Indians at that time worshipped many gods, idols, just as Abraham's father worshipped many gods. If you remember, you read about it in the book of Joshua. You will also read about this in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, what you call the Old Testament, in the book of Joshua, chapters 24. It tells you there that your forefathers came from the other side of the river. What river? What other side? The river Euphrates. The other side of Euphrates, it begins the Persian Empire, and it is a vast area covering today's modern Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Bangladesh, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all those areas. So what should the ancient forefathers look like? They should look like me, not you. That's the problem, you see. That's the problem that you have to deal with. When Noah came out of the ark with his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, well, what do you think? Do you think that there were plenty of women of other nations sitting there for them to marry their children into? Of course not. So the only women that our children could marry into, so Shem's sons, they married into Ham's children. In other words, Ham's daughters. So if we take Ham's daughters, Shem, meaning Indian looking man like me, brownie, if he marries into Ham's sons who are jet black and they look like you in North America, what do you think we're going to produce? We're going to produce children with different skin tones of brown, with some with locked hair, some without locked hair. That's where you come from. That's why we have some people of Israel, ancient Israel, who perhaps look black, and we have other people who have lighter skin tones. There is no such thing as black across the board. That would be a falsehood to teach that there's just black across the board. That is not true, because if I bring you to Abraham, our forefather, and if I tell you about his wives, he had a black wife from Egypt. Well, what kind of son she's going to give him? Ishmael is going to be a son of darker skin tone. Now, what about his other wives? Well, Sarah, clearly, there are two opinions on Sarah, and you can take whichever opinion you like. You can take the opinion that Sarah's from Chad, or you can take the opinion that Sarah's from India. I would probably go with the opinion that Sarah's family also originated out of India. Therefore, they both look like each other, and they're going to produce children that are going to look like Indians. Therefore, Yitzhak, Isaac, is going to look like me. He's not going to look like you, unfortunately. There's no such thing. Now, therefore, that means we're going to have two sons, Esau, which you call Esau, and you call Jacob. Those two sons. Well, everything is determined by who they marry. Now, I didn't go back and explain that Abraham also had a white wife, a Caucasian wife, whose name was Mashech, who was from Turkey. Well, guess what, guys? If Abraham's family were domiciled in Turkey, what are the chances do you think that Abraham will have a Turkic wife? What do you think are the chances? And what do today's Turkic people look like? Most of them look like Caucasian, white people. They pass for an Englishman anytime, more than me. So therefore, the question is, if he married into a Turkic woman, which he did, And that's whose son we know was Eliezer, his older son. So if he had a white woman, what do you reckon? Do you reckon she's going to have some white children? Potentially? Yes, she is. That means that Abraham will have white in the mix as well. Do you think they followed the God of Israel? Most likely, 100%. Definitely followed the God of Israel. So where does that leave us? So let's go forward a little bit, then we'll come back. We'll go forward, we'll come back, we'll try to get some understanding. So if we go forward, we come back to Isaac. So what does Isaac's wife, Rebecca, what does she tell her son, Jacob? You are not to marry the woman of Canaan. Who were the women of Canaan? These daughters of Ham, black women who were corrupted, who were worshipping false idols, who were sacrificing their children to false idols. So the mom, Rebecca, told her son, you are not to marry into these heathens that are worshipping false idols. Therefore, you must go back to the family. Exactly the same pattern that Abraham had taken an oath from his son Eliezer, who is referred to as his servant. He took an oath, you are not to marry my son Isaac into these heathen women in this land where I am. In other words, Canaan, daughters of Ham, who were completely corrupted by that time. Previously, in the time of Noah, that time they were all obeying Torah. But by now, several hundred years later, they no longer were in Torah. They were into all sorts of false worship. Therefore, the indictment was given against them. Do not marry into these black women because they are corrupted. They are into false worship. They do not worship the God of Israel. You must not take those women. And the injunction came from God as well later on. So therefore, what happens? What happens is that Jacob is sent back to his Indian family, Indian looking family. Where? In Iraq, where they are settled in Padan Aram. Let's break those two words down. Padan Aram. Aram is the area where we get the language Aramaic, meaning Babylonia, Persia, which spoke to a large extent. They spoke the Aramaic language, square script, what they call square script Hebrew today. So if they spoke Aramaic, that brings another interesting thing, doesn't it? That means surely if they spoke Aramaic, well, do you speak Aramaic in North America? I haven't heard anybody speaking Aramaic in North America. But you can see plenty of people, even today there are people in India who know Aramaic. If you go to Pakistan, you will have people speaking the Persian tongue. My own uncle, who passed away a few years ago, he spoke fluently the Persian tongue. Therefore, that means that North America, the black folks there who want to be Hebrews, they don't have the Persian tongue. So who has more connection to Abraham's family, you or me? Who do you think is going to be a Levite priest, you or me? So therefore, we have a genealogy. We have the language. Pakistan speaks today widely a language called Urdu, which has its roots in ancient Persian tongue. That is where the Jews came from after their exile. And today, let me tell you something of interest. Today, in 2017, I have contact with a Jewish man in Pakistan who looks 100% like me. What do you think he should look like? And he came out of Iraq. His whole family came out of Iraq. 2,000 years ago, they left Iraq at the destruction of our temple, and they went to Pakistan and they domiciled in Pakistan. So for all practical purposes today, they look like Pakistanis, of course. They're not going to look like English. They're not going to look like Americans. They're not going to look Negro either. So therefore, I think that the important question is are all the Negroes Hebrews? The answer is no, they are not. So therefore, you need to remove this ignorance card, and everybody calling themselves Israelite, shouting in the streets of New York, oh, I'm Israel. No, you're not Israel. You are just a misguided person. Because if you were really Israel, you would be obeying the Torah. You would be doing the things that my forefathers did, both in Babylonia, such as Daniel the prophet, who was my forefather, by the way, such as the Persian domiciled Hebrews. What did they do? Well, they obeyed the 7 festivals. They didn't believe in Jesus. They don't know who Jesus was. This is a later thing. Rabbi Yeshua came much later. So they obeyed the Torah laws. You can read about it. Daniel the prophet, what does he do? The king offers him delicacies, foods, everything. What does Daniel the prophet say? No, thank you. I don't want to have your food because I'm a Hebrew. I eat kosher. I want to only have lentils. Well, most of you in North America are sucking on pig and you think you're Hebrews. It's laugh, isn't it? It's laughable. In order to be a Hebrew, in order to do the Torah, you have to remove yourself from the very foods that you call your foods and the very way of lives living. You have to remove yourself from that kind of lifestyle to a Torah lifestyle. A Torah lifestyle is, number 1, obeying the God of Israel, keeping the Sabbath, guarding the Sabbath. Number 2, you have to eat the foods that are qualified kosher. That means you can't have pig. Number 3, you cannot be celebrating festivals of the Goyim, the Gentiles. You have to celebrate festivals of Israel, Passover, Pentecost, tabernacles, all those kind of good things. So whilst most of you are still stuck in churches, still running after Jesus Christ and doing after other things, maybe some of you are into Islam and Muslim and all that nonsense. So therefore, question is this: how can you be Hebrews if your character does not resemble anything from the Torah? That means if you really had the blood of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, then surely you would say that the Torah is your life, Torah is your faith, Torah is your way of living. But if you don't, if you're running to a church every Sunday, then I'd have to question, are you really a Hebrew? Probably not. So, I wouldn't even bank on it. However, if you were connected to Israel ancient, as I explained, that when Noah's sons came out of the ark, Shem, who was a brown man like me, his daughters married into Ham's daughter, his sons married Ham's daughters, which was permitted at that time. And so therefore we're going to produce a mixture. And if Abraham's going to have a Caucasian wife, Abraham's going to have Sarah, a wife that looks like brown color, then she's going to produce brown children. That means Isaac was like me. And then if Isaac subsequently produces 2 sons, they're going to look like me as well, right? So you look at the Middle Eastern Jews, what do they look like? Do they look like me, or do they look like, somebody else in China maybe? No, of course not. So we have to understand that we must take scripture and history with it and get an understanding. When we do that, we'll never go wrong. But if we dissect, if we just remove ourselves from scripture and just pretend to be somebody we are not, we'll never get anywhere. However, I'm not saying that you cannot become part of Israel. You can. Every one of you can become part of Israel today. All you have to do is take the oath, take the immersion, give the oath, give the offering. You're ready to become Israel. You can all become Israel. So in order to be part of the contracted people, covenanted people of God, you have to take the oath, then demonstrate Torah in your lives. If you don't demonstrate Torah, you cannot be qualified a Hebrew. You can't go around in the street saying I'm a Hebrew and you're worshipping in church on Sunday. That's not a Hebrew. So therefore you have to come out of that. So let's go back to Abraham. Let's go back to these people called Yadawas. Let's go back to the land that we once inhabited in Israel, an area known as Judea. Judea, from the Hebrew word Judea, and from the Hebrew word where we get Judah as well, and we get the Indian Sanskrit word Yud, which actually means a warrior of God. So therefore the people who are known to have come out of India, settled in Turkey, and then Abraham gave away, he left that worship of his forefathers, which was idolatrous, worshipping statues. So Abraham left eastern Turkey, southeastern Turkey, to be on the exact space. He then traveled down into Iraq. From Iraq, he traveled down into Israel, into what we know as Hebron. If you go to Hebron, Shechem, then if you go to Hebron, you will see that his grave is there today. for everybody to see. It's 100% guaranteed that he was buried there, no doubt about it. Therefore, if Abraham traveled down there, let's look at Abraham's name. His name before God changed it was Abram. Abram's name came from the Indian deity, Indian god Brahma. So Abraham's forefathers were Brahmins. Brahmins are priests in India. So these priests, and if you go look, they still exist today. So we know our history. Because we know our history, we know what we should look like. However, this is not to say that you can't be Israel if you are Chinese looking maybe. Why? Because if you marry a Chinese woman and you produce a Chinese looking child, then of course that's an Israelite as well. Just as I explained to you, if we marry into Ham, a black woman, Ham's daughters, what are we going to produce? Dark colored children with with locks and all the looks that you have in North America. So therefore there is consensus that a certain portion of Hebrews were taken in the slave trade. Not all of them, but a certain portion. That portion is what is in North America, potentially in Europe as well. So we know that an island in the coast of Africa called Sao Tome, from there a British ship that was carrying the Portuguese flag exported slaves, took slaves out from that island and shipped them over to the Americas. By the way, they were Jews. Yes, that's the only people that I know definitely who were black Jews. But there is no other account of Africa, Ghana, for instance, Nigeria, or for instance, what's known as the slave coast today or in the ancient times, which was an area that was domiciled between Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, where the slave ships went and brought back slaves. Well, most of the people that were gathered from there were the sons and the daughters of Ham, not Shem. So let's get this straight. Not all of the slaves came out of, that came out were Hebrews. As I explained, some were, not all of them. So today, by my estimation, and you can disagree with it if you like, by my estimation, only 10% people that boarded those ships potentially were Hebrews. Everybody else, nothing to do with us. Totally Hamites, 100% Hamites. But as I said earlier, your father, if you're a Ham, your father Ham at one point did obey the Torah laws until Nimrod, the one who became rebellious, started calling for his worship. He deified himself as some ancient rulers do. At that point we can see that is when it digressed, and God was so angry that he split their languages. We read about in Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel. Well, go look up where it is. So as I said, that you got to stop this chapter of ignorance, and you got to stop this cursing down white people and calling them sons of Edomites, etc. They are not Edomites. Most of the white folks that you see in America and Europe, they are the sons of Japheth. What they got to do with Edom? Yes, if they had married into the ancient Edomites, then you could say yes, some of them could be, but not all of them. So therefore, once again, you only demonstrate your ignorance of ancient history and your arrogance of today by calling yourself what you're not and then putting other people down. That, by the way, is not permitted. What is permitted is that you can obey God. You can go to a rabbi, you come to myself, you go to another rabbi who can convert you into the Torah, and you can obey God. You can become part of Israel. That is allowed. But what is not allowed is your foul mouth in New York City's square, Chicago, foul mouth on the streets. That is not permitted. That is very, very bad. and it reflects really badly on every black person in America. It shows, it makes a stereotype that all the black people are the same. That's a bad stereotype. So you need to stop these actions with all these different groups. I don't know, they have all these labels, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, E, H, United Church of Christ, and then there's others. There's so many of these groups that potentially are misleading the people, misteaching them, and generating hatred against the people they live with, which is, again, as I said, not a good thing. Should stay away from that. So therefore, as I explained, now what is a Jew today, 2017? Most of you have seen Jews today. You've seen the Ashkenazi in Europe. You have seen, I'm standing right here in Vienna. There's a lot of Jews over here, Ashkenazi. So you have seen the Sephardi Jews that came from Spain. You have seen the Yemenite Jews. You have seen the Middle Eastern Jews, the Mizrahi Jews. We also know the Persian Jews, the Iranian Jews. There's at least 33 to 35,000 Iranian Jews right now situated in Iran. So, all different colors and shapes, but yet all called Jew. Maybe some of them are from the tribe of Judah, maybe some of them are from the tribe of Benjamin, maybe some from Levi, etc. So, question is this: we know historically that we converted two major kingdoms. We converted a kingdom in Yemen called the Himyarite Kingdom, where we had a king in the 5th century who accepted Judaism. His whole kingdom converted. We then converted another kingdom in Khazaria in the Caspian Sea region called Khazaria at the time, or also known as Al-Qusr. Those people, or Qasr, those people from that region, they converted into wholesale Judaism. Joseph was the name of their king. We had a counselor or a council to the king in Spain, and Ibn Shiprut, and he basically wrote to one of the people and asked him the question that where do you people come from? Who are you? And did the kingdom, we heard that the whole kingdom converted to Judaism. And so the person responded back, yes, that our king is called Joseph. Yes, we all converted. Yes, this is the situation. And so therefore, we know that a lot of the people of Caucasian skin tone that came into what today is termed Ashkenazi Jews, they came out of what's called the Caspian region. And today you'll find those Jews, today you'll find them in Ukraine, you'll find them in Russia, you'll find them probably in Eastern Europe, like this country, Vienna, Austria. You'll find them in Hungary, you'll find them in other parts of Eastern Europe like Poland. That's where you see a lot of white Jews. But when you go towards the Middle East, you see a lot of Jews my skin tone, like me, same like me, no different to me. In Yemen, no different to me. In dress code, wearing Middle Eastern type dresses. So therefore, that gives you a little bit brief history of our people. Therefore, as I explained, that Sarah, Abraham's wife, was called Sarai, and we have a history of somebody in India called Saraswati. So Saraswati, go look it up, who she was. Go look up Brahma. So therefore, ancient people, what they did, they took the name of their god upon themselves. That's why we got Abram instead of something else from Brahma. And this is why we have, for instance, we have our God, the God of Israel. As you know, Yud and He, Wa and He. So we have Yeshayahu. What is that? Isaiah the prophet, who has God's names attached to him. Yirmiyah, Jeremiah the prophet, God's name attached to him. Same way the culture was that people attached the false gods' names to them. Hence why we had the term of an ancient king. If you remember Nebuchadnezzar, well, Nebu or Nebu was one of the false gods of Babylon. So therefore Nebuchadnezzar took the name of his god that he worshipped. So we can see that ancient people used the names of ancient gods they believed in. However, the people of Israel and the people of Abraham, they took the names, applied the names of the God of Israel. So when we go back, I want to also point out that Abraham had a wife called Keturah. Keturah, by the way, wasn't what you imagine. Keturah was an Arab woman. She was from the great-grandfather called Yoktan. So therefore, she was married to Abraham from Abraham's matrilineal side, whilst Abraham's wife Sarai, known as Sarah, she came from Abraham's patrilineal side, from the father's side, as you will read about it in the book of Genesis. So I hope that I've cleared some confusion regards my skin color and your skin color. Therefore, I'm not saying, so don't get it twisted and don't get it wrong. I'm not saying that a Jew can't be black color, because we do have black Jews. But I am saying that your behavior, your character will reflect if you are truly a Jew or not. So coming back to the question of who is a Jew today. Well, most of you think that a Jew is somebody of a race and that's it, he is part of Israel because he's called a Jew. No. The term Jew applies to anybody, any tribe of Israel out of the 12 tribes, and it means somebody who's consecrated to God. Whilst you might mistake it for somebody who is, a dweller of Judea or Jerusalem, for argument's sake. No. So the term has developed. The term developed and modified itself over time from 17th century onwards, and it became like a race of people. But actually, the term Jew, when it applies to us, it means that we are consecrated to God, the God of Israel. That's really what the term really means. It's got nothing to do with what tribe I belong to. It doesn't mean that I belong to the tribe of Judah, which most people make a mistake when they say, oh, Jew means, oh, he belongs to the tribe of Judah. Not really. Because a Jew can belong to the tribe of Benjamin or Judah or Reuben or some of the other tribes that we have. Hence why I think that's another fallacy to say that all Jews belong to the tribe of Judah. Another convoluted idea that you see out there, that most Christians and churches think in their heads. And of course also the so-called people in America who think they are Jews, such as the black Hebrews, whilst most of those are nothing but pure Gentiles. So I like to leave it at this point. It looks like my battery is running out. Not a problem. So with all this information, I hope it clarifies that how you can be part of Israel, or whether you are even part of Israel. So with this information, I hope it's been helpful for you to understand that we as Israel, we don't have a problem with people, whatever skin color they are, whether they are white, because yes, there are some Israelites who are white, whether they are black, whether they are brown, or whether they are yellow, or some other mix. So we certainly don't have a problem. However, what is important is the character of the person who is trying to obey the laws of the God of Israel. So I'll leave you with this from Vienna, Austria. Rabbi Simon Altaf HaKohen. Shalom, shalom.